I'm Kiera Morgan. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Coffee with Kiera, sponsored by The Human Being in Newport and Lincoln City. And today I'm excited to be here with State Representative David Gomberg.
Good to be back with you, Kiera, and with all your listeners. Thank you for having me again.
Absolutely. You have been very busy in this short session, so we're going to jump in and get right to it.
Well, let's start with this. It is a windy, blustery, distressing day here on the Oregon coast, which is an apt metaphor for the state of politics, both in our nation and in our state right now. But yes, I'm just back from the short legislative session, which concluded on Friday. And you, of course, know that in Oregon, we meet in odd-numbered years for about 5 months to write a budget and it's a 2-year budget, and then also to pass legislation. In alternate years, the even-numbered years, we meet for about 5 weeks, and that's why we call it the short session. And it's supposed to be kind of a fine-tuning process of just going back and looking at things that we had passed in the previous year and trying to update them and make changes if needed. This year was way, way different.
It was. There was a lot that went through, a lot that was proposed. In my experience working with you and covering this all these years, it's just been a few little budget tweaks or a couple things. This felt like a full session crammed in 5 weeks. Am I wrong?
No, absolutely. It was a sprint from day one to day last. And in a short session, we limit the number of bills that can be proposed, but still, if we tell everybody they can only have 2 bills, and that means that we've got about 300 bills in the process, and all of them are on the move in a 5-week period. I mean, if you want to get a bill to the finish line, it needs a hearing the first week so it can go to the House floor the second week, so it can get a Senate hearing the third week, so it can go to the Senate floor the 4th week, or it's not going to make it. So everybody is pushing. But the real news this session was not so much about policy, even though that got all the headlines. It was about the budget. Because no sooner had we concluded the session last year and written a 2-year budget, we got news from the federal government about programs they were canceling and about tax reductions that they wanted to implement. Now, here in Oregon, we don't have a sales tax, we have an income tax. And we base income tax collections on the federal tax code. So when they change that code, it affects how much money we either bring in or don't bring in. And we found out that we were going to lose in the neighborhood of $700 million because of the changes that the federal government was implementing. And a lot of people would say, well, those are tax cuts. I mean, that's great. I would be paying less. And I can't argue with that, but at the same time, if we have less money coming in, it means we've got less money to spend. We're required to balance our budget, unlike the federal government. So we had to look at the possibility of $700 million in cuts. And on top of that, we also had to look at changes in the Department of Transportation, because costs for maintaining our roads are going up. The cost of labor, the cost of asphalt, the cost of steel, everything, just like your household budget is costing more, the cost of maintaining our roads is going up as well. And so to address that, we had proposed a slight increase in the gasoline tax, but Oregon voters, in their ultimate wisdom, decided that they wanted to have a say on that as well. They referred it to the ballot. That means that we did not have the money that we had anticipated to balance the ODOT budget. And so we had to cut the ODOT budget by about $300 million. So that's the other big story. We're cutting the general budget by $700, and we're cutting the ODOT budget by $300. That's $1 billion that we're taking out of the Oregon budget in just 5 weeks.
Wow. But you did it.
We did it.
Made some cuts with ODOT, cutting back on some grant funding, Connect Oregon, for example.
Yeah, we did. Let's talk about the ODOT budget, because I was in the forefront of that conversation. I was one of the key negotiators in that small room. And we looked at the cuts we needed to make. The first thing we did is we looked at the vacant positions in ODOT. And there are a lot of vacant positions in ODOT. Nearly 20% of their staff has resigned or retired in the last 10 months. That's That's concerning for a number of reasons, but the fact remains that we have vacant positions. So leaving them vacant is the first thing that we looked at doing, is what positions are essential and can we leave the other positions vacant rather than spending more money to fill them. Then we started looking at moving some dollars around on some big projects, big bridges in Portland like the Rose Quarter or the Abernathy Bridge, big projects in Salem like the Center Street Bridge. And we were able to find some ways to do a little accounting magic and get the federal government to pay for more of that than Oregon is paying for. And that took care of about half the problem, about $150 million. Then we got into programs that are, as you said, grant programs, Safe Routes to School, which is a program that builds sidewalks and crosswalks near schools. Connect Oregon, which is a program that helps our ports and our rail lines, which are so crucial to rural economies. We also took money out of another fund, the Transportation Opportunity Fund, which takes care of like EV charging stations. And we took money out of pathways, like the coast to Corvallis pathway that was opened a few years ago, pathways like that. Driver training, we reduced spending on that. And so with all of these small but significant reductions, we were able to come back and reduce the overall ODOT budget by $300 million on top of the $50 million that we already reduced it during the last long session. I think Oregonians are going to see the difference. They're going to see they're going to see more potholes that aren't filled. They're going to see snow removal not as reliable if we get snow on in our passes. And you're going to have longer wait times at DMV. Those are the consequences of reducing those budgets. And some of the things people are not going to see. My greatest concern in all of those reductions is that we had to delay repairs to a number of coastal bridges. We didn't cancel the repairs. We just said we can't
got
afford
them on pause, right?
Yeah, we're going to put them on pause. We're going to come back and take care of them later. And, that means it's going to cost more money to do it when we do it. But those are taking care of our bridges that are either in need of repairs or in need of seismic retrofits. And most of those bridges are here on the coast. So that's going to have a consequence here. Those are the changes that we're looking at in just the ODOT budget alone.
And let's talk about some of the positive things that you were able to do for the coast in this short session. Got some money to help out Central Coast Fire and Rescue.
I did. The headlines are all about big policy bills. I go to Salem with a priority of bringing money home for critically important things that are going on here in our district. Water systems, sewer systems, ports, parks, and making those repairs, because too often small towns can't afford those big projects.
Well, and more of those big projects are coming about because the infrastructure is so old.
Right. Things are aging out, or they're at capacity, or they're falling apart. I point to the town of Siletz that we got $3 million for last session. Because their sewer system was falling apart, and it was going to cost $11 million to fix it. $11 million in a town of about 1,100 people. How are they going to fix that on their own if they don't get help? So I was able to bring money home for that. This session, we brought money home to help the city of Waldport and the Central Coast Fire District take care of a fire station that was starting to age out, he says politely. I brought money home for a new housing development in Depot Bay, workforce housing. I mean, what's the thing that we all say we need the most here? It's people that want to work here can't find a place to live here. And so I brought home $2.5 million for a new housing development above Depot Bay. I'm very pleased with that. We were able to bring home about $2.5 million for a sewer system in Philomath and a water system in Monroe. So those were positive things where we brought new money home. The other thing we had to go to work on this year is when we're cutting budgets, I want to make sure we're not cutting things that we want here.
Mhm.
So one of the things that was on the chopping block was marine reserves. There are 5 marine reserves on the Oregon coast, 3 of them off the coast of our district, at Cascade Head, at Otter Rock, and then further down near Hasita Head. And so those are scientific exploration areas set aside for conservation. But when we do that scientific exploration, we hire local fishing crews, their boats, to go out into the water with scientists on board instead of fishing nets on board.
Right.
And there's a lot of money that comes back into our fishing fleet from our marine reserves. That was all on the chopping block. By the time we got out of there, it was no longer being cut. Our Maritime Task Force for Workforce, that means jobs that have to do with the ocean, whether it's
Blue economy.
the blue
right?
economy. Everybody says, what's the blue economy? Well, it's jobs that are related to the ocean, and that could be fishing, but it could also be the diesel mechanic that keeps those fishing boats running. It could be the welder who does repairs at the port of Toledo when they bring small boats out of the water, put them in the dry dock, and make them into big boats. There's so many different new opportunities. I look at what we're doing with fish processing and trying to use more of the waste materials that we're currently throwing away when we catch fish. And there are programs now that we're looking at that will use the fish skins for leather. They will use the fish bones for dog treats. They will use some of they can use a fish skin and use it for burn victims and skin grafts. Amazing stuff.
That's
and then
incredible.
And all the oils that they take out of the fish that they can use for medicines or salves or cosmetics. So using more of the fish. Those are some ideas that come out of the blue economy. That was on the chopping block. We got the blue economy maritime workforce left into the program. And then finally, on the ocean science front, we also got some opportunities for the Oregon Ocean Science Trust, a group that issues grants for scientific research. They've been doing that with state money. We opened it up so now they can go after private grants and use somebody else's money to do that same kind of research. And that's a positive thing in a community that relies so much on ocean science and where we've got this remarkable center of ocean exploration at the Hatfield Marine Science Center on the South Bay.
That's incredible. That's a lot.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it felt like a lot. But we got a lot done, and I felt good about that.
So is there anything else that you want to add about this session that stands out to you?
Yeah, there's one other thing that's going on, and it has to do with pushing back against the federal government's overreach on immigration issues. Here on the Central Coast, that's been front and center of our concerns when we began to discover that the federal government wanted to base a regional detention and detention center. Well, they wanted to bring people here and then put them on airplanes and take them someplace else. And they wanted to do that on a regional basis. I mean, they didn't admit that right up front, but it became increasingly clear as my office and the city of Newport working together began to ferret out some of the details. And the Central Coast pushed back hard on that. And the federal government finally said, well, we don't really have any current plans. Meanwhile, we go to Salem. We passed legislation that says that schools are not going to release immigration information because we had a case where a woman's dropping her child off at school and they're arrested by ICE. That medical facilities are not going to share immigration information because we want people who get hurt to go and get treatment. And we had somebody whose daughter had a nosebleed, and she was taking them to the emergency room, and ICE pulled up and arrested her in the parking lot. I mean, it's that kind of stuff. We passed legislation that said that police officials have to have a name badge and can't wear a mask to hide their personal identity. And we passed legislation that said if police officers come to your home without a warrant and violate your civil rights, civil liberties, that they can be held accountable for that. There was a host of different kinds of bills that were intended to ensure the constitutional rights of people that are residing here in Oregon.
And it's important to point out that you're not talking about criminals.
No.
You're talking about everyday citizens that contribute to our society.
Well, yeah, I get letters every day saying people who come here illegally are criminals. They are committing a misdemeanor by coming here on an undocumented status. We are not talking about felons who are involved in child trafficking and drugs and murder, rape, and other major crimes. And if there are people that are involved in criminal behaviors, they should be held accountable for that.
Mhm.
We're talking about people that have lived in our community for decades, whose kids are in our schools, children that are born here that are American citizens, but their parents are not. People who don't have a parking ticket on their record, but that are being arrested and deported with minimal court review. And those are some of the areas where we have concerns.
And what are some other things that that you worked on as well?
Well, I mean, we're trying.
Sorry, it just
Please, tell me what are the things I'm working on.
It just popped into my head. The trails and keeping trails open.
Yep.
That was something that you guys continued on.
I think what you're talking about is what we call recreational liability.
Yes, yes.
You know, if and starting with a case that occurred here in Newport, where somebody was on a public trail and slipped and hurt themselves, a lawsuit was brought. The law in Oregon had previously said, if you're using someone else's property and not being charged for it, and you hurt yourself in what we call ordinary negligence, not gross negligence, not a serious omission by the property owner that creates a dangerous situation, but
just slip or a stumble, or
something like that. That you're not allowed to sue the property owner. Well, the courts took a different view of that in this case here in Newport, because they said this unfortunate woman who was injured wasn't recreating. She was on her way to recreate because she was using the trail to get to the beach to take a hike on the beach. A lawyerly distinction.
Yes.
So we were able to clear up the law using public property and private property if you're doing free recreation. This session, we came back and took a look at paid recreation. If you go to a ski resort, if you go to a gym, and you are injured there, not with gross negligence, but with ordinary negligence, can you sue them? And the issue is, if you sign a waiver saying, hey, if I injure myself while I'm using your equipment, I can't sue you. Is that binding? Well, originally the answer to that was no. But under new legislation we passed, it's clearer now that if you sign a waiver in order to use somebody's recreational business, that you can't sue them. And that may seem unfair on one hand, but on the other hand, we were hearing from places like ski resorts that their insurance rates were just skyrocketing, and they were looking at closing down the ski industry in Oregon if we couldn't add a little more clarity to what would happen if somebody slipped going downhill on skis.
Well, and not to mention that also causes prices to rise, because the business is in business to make money. And if they are paying additional fees and costs and things, it's going to outprice it for everybody else.
Well,
right?
and the first thing that will happen is that prices will go up. And the second thing that will happen is if people can't pay those prices, the business will fail. So we were looking at a fix to recreational immunity. That was one of the areas that we were looking at dealing with economic enhancement, trying to create more jobs in Oregon, trying to get better paying jobs, trying to make the cost of living a little more affordable for people in Oregon. One of the bills that I was involved with had to do with loans that had exorbitant interest rates on them. And I'm not talking 12% or even 20%. I was talking about emergency loans that people would offer you if you didn't have collateral, and they'd charge you up to 100 or 200% interest.
Oh, I thought we did away with those.
Well, I thought we had too, and we said that you couldn't do that in Oregon. What we had banks in other states that were coming in and doing business in Oregon, and saying you don't have collateral. you don't have anything you can sell, you don't have anybody you can borrow, relatives you can borrow from, you need an emergency loan, we'll help you out. And we'll
Loan
only
shark.
charge you 150% interest.
Bottom.
And we put a stop to that.
Good.
So it was those kinds of things where we're trying to provide a little more consumer protection and a little more flexibility. I'm reminded that 40% of Oregonians can't afford a $400 emergency. They don't have $400 if a tree falls on the roof, or their car has an accident, or they have a medical bill. All of a sudden, they don't have that kind of financial flexibility. Oregon does have something called Oregon Saves, and it's a program where they will take a little bit of money out of your paycheck each month and put it into a savings account for you. And about 20,000 Oregonians take advantage of that. But that is to say, most Oregonians do not. They'd rather take that extra $5 a month home and spend it than put it into a savings account that'll put them in a slightly safer situation if they have that $400 emergency.
And I've used Oregon Saves, and you don't even miss it. You don't even notice.
It's a cup of coffee a month.
It's like your taxes. It's just, it's just there.
Except it's your money.
But it's your money. Yes, yes.
Now, the other thing I should tell you, coming out of this last session, particularly in the last week, when all the big bills are coming down the pipeline, because big bills take a while to get their way through, and they all land on you the last week. There's a couple of places I voted no. The Democratic Speaker of the House voted yes, the Democratic Leader of the House voted yes, and David Gomberg voted no. One of those had to do with the Moda Center in Portland. This is the big amphitheater where the Blazers play. And we've got people coming and saying to us, if we don't fix the Moda Center, the Blazers are going to leave. I'm going, wow. Well, I don't know how many people from here on the coast go up to Blazer games. I'm sure there's some, and I'm sure they love the experience. The argument is made that the Oregon economy depends on Portland, and this is an issue of Portland pride and Portland resilience and the Portland recovery, and we need to fix the Moda Center. And the county was kicking in, and the city was kicking in, and the state wanted to kick in. You know who was not kicking in? The Texas billionaire who owns the Trailblazers. And I'm saying, if the owner of the Trailblazers isn't going to contribute, why should I ask coastal taxpayers to contribute to the Moda Center? I voted no. We had another big issue that came down, has to do with campaign finance. All the money that goes into politics. $70 million was spent on the governor's race 4 years ago.
And I didn't see a penny.
Yeah. So 2 years ago, I voted for an ambitious piece of legislation to say we need to limit the amount of contributions, the number of contributions. We need to clarify the reporting process. I voted for that with enthusiasm. So the Secretary of State came back to us this year and says, now I got to rewrite the whole computer program, for that reports on how much people have collected, that compares them to other collections, cross matches, and makes all of this very, very public. We have that now, but with new changes, they have to redo the whole thing. So he said, $25 million to get that done, and a little more time. That's the request that came to us. And I want to make sure that we do this, and I want to make sure we do it right. But at the same time, the big changes that we made, somehow we're getting watered down. And there were exceptions being approved, and back doors that were being left open. And so I want the Secretary of State to do this good work, and I want us to limit the role of money in campaigns. But I could not get behind this bill because I thought that it created more problems than it solved, and I voted no on it. And I'm hearing about that one. And then the last one I wanted to mention, and it's particularly difficult because there's a big hospital down in Coos Bay, the Bay Area Hospital, 150 beds.
My daughter-in-law works there.
Yeah, does she? Well, and that was a hospital that was built when timber was king and Coos Bay was the center of it. And there was a lot of activity going on down there. Well, now the Coos Bay Hospital, like every rural hospital, is having trouble bringing in enough money to pay their bills. And they have a loan with the Bank of Montreal in Canada with a big balloon payment coming in 2030 or 29, I'm trying to remember which. But they're also concerned that if they cannot get their act together now, that the bank is going to call the loan. And so a proposal came from the legislator in Coos Bay to have the state of Oregon guarantee the loan. And here's the creative plan they came up with. We've got something called the unclaimed property account in the treasurer's office. And I write about it all the time in my newsletter. People who have leftover deposits or unclaimed paychecks, they moved away and people don't know where to send the paycheck to. The business doesn't get to keep that. They put it all in this unclaimed property account. Bank accounts where people moved away and left a couple of bucks in the account. There's a lot of money in that account. So somebody got the creative idea that we're going to dip into that account and use some of that money to guarantee this loan. Now,
well, then what happens when people come to get their money?
Well, it's a big account, and they're not going to take all of it, but that's not the point. The point for me is that money doesn't belong to the state of Oregon. It belongs to Oregonians who haven't claimed it yet. And when we garner interest on that account, that interest money goes into the Common School Fund, which means it supports education throughout the entire state. So we're going to fix one hospital with money that otherwise would help every school district in the state. And first of all, I wasn't convinced that this loan was going to get foreclosed on right away. I didn't see why there was a need for a rush solution to the problem. The second thing is the balloon payment was 30 years out. And here's the third thing. You're going to love the third thing. Here in Lincoln County, we have hospitals and we have hospital districts, and we pay taxes to support our local hospitals. Coos Bay doesn't do that. I wasn't going to come back here and say, Kiera, I'd like you to pay taxes for your local hospital, and I'd also like you to pay taxes to help somebody else's hospital further down the coast. I wasn't going to do that. And
Thank you.
And if in fact this hospital did get downgraded, which is everybody was worried they're going to get downgraded, they would be downgraded to a Class B hospital, which is where our local hospitals are. They're Class B hospitals. We don't have 150 beds. In Lincoln City, we've got 30 beds. You know, we don't have many more than that here in Newport or in Tillamook. So they were implementing this plan to take money away from schools to make sure that their hospitals didn't become as bad as our hospitals. And I think our hospitals are pretty good.
We have really good hospitals.
You know, and the model is that we don't need as many hospital beds because so many treatments now are done on an outpatient basis. And they said, well, you know, if we downgrade our hospital and somebody has an illness, like if they get, God forbid, they get cancer, they're going to have to drive an hour for chemo. And I'm going, my wife had cancer and she had to drive an hour for chemo. And we know that whether you're getting chemotherapy or whether you need a root canal, you need to go to the valley to get it done. That's life on the coast, and we'd like to make it better. But when we make it better, we need to make it better for all of our rural hospitals, not just one rural hospital, and certainly not at the expense of public education, which has got its own challenges. So those are some of my big no votes the last few days of sessions.
Appreciate that. All right. What would you like to add as we are wrapping up?
Legislative session's over. I'm back in the district. My wife says I'm gone more now than I was. At least when I was gone during session, she knew when I was going to be gone. I mean, today I've got breakfast with the Lincoln County mayors at 7:30 in the morning. I'm sitting down with you before 9 o'clock. I've got another commitment at about 11 and then one at 2:30 in the afternoon. And they're all in different parts of the district, which stretches, you know, from Lincoln City all the way to Junction City and from Florence to Philomath. So I'm on the run now and racking up more miles than when I was just driving to Salem back and forth every day. If people want to know what's going on, please sign up for my legislative newsletter. It doesn't cost anything.
Nope.
If you don't like it, you can take your name off the list and you'll never hear from me again. But every Monday we send out an update on what's going on with news that I think is relevant to our district and the people that live and work here.
And it's a really great newsletter. It provides some wonderful updates, and you don't just do it during session or during election season. You do it all the time.
Yeah, so
And it comes from you. It's not like
I write it myself.
you're not paying staff to put something fancy
generated
together.
by artificial intelligence. It's not generated by my staff. Every Sunday morning I sit down and I write that report, and we distribute them every Monday.
All right.
So please sign up for it and stay in touch. Find out more about what's going on with your government.
And where can they sign
Well,
up
they go
for
to
it?
my legislative webpage, or they can just email me at that's rep.davidgomberg, Gomberg, at oregonlegislature.gov. I'm not hard to find. Go to my legislative webpage, click on the button that says subscribe to newsletter.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much for joining me
Always.
on this episode of Coffee with Kiera.
And thank you for the human being.
Yes, that is our wonderful sponsor. They are located in Newport at 6th Street and Highway 101. In Lincoln City, you can find them at the north end of town on the west side next to TLC Credit Union. Thanks for joining me. I'm Kiera Morgan.